Ladies and gentlemen, back with some more Arc Raiders today, and this one's going to be coming to you with some post-commentary, since most of my videos have been primarily from an immersive perspective, kind of not attempting to break the fourth wall and just enjoy raids as if they were real in a way. But with that said, I think I have about 80 hours in the game, according to Steam, but that's probably not counting inventory management and just sitting in the menu doing who knows what. I imagine most dedicated content creators in this game or genre have far more hours, potentially hundreds of hours, but I really can't sit and play video games as much as I'd like to, or as long as I used to be able to. I've been trying to get out a bit more and stay fit, exercise, stretch. You know, you get older, certain things start to creep up on you, and you gotta start paying a little bit more attention to your health. So if you're a gamer, remember, there's a real world out there, and sometimes it's enjoyable, sometimes. Anyways, moving right along. Arc Raiders. Well, I do still enjoy it. I'm not sick of it just yet, but again, that probably has to do with the fact that I haven't played it as much as most people, especially content creators. However, with that said, I imagine that at some point the new game smell will wear off and I'll want to move on to something else, but we'll see. It's really going to depend on Embark's ability to churn out new content. How can they continue to make this game interesting with new maps, modes, events, quests? Can they start implementing some story? Can they introduce AI or NPCs that are somewhat interesting in comparison to what we have now, which is sort of just bland, dry, generic quest giving that you could potentially find in any run-of-the-mill RPG or MMO? I think we should talk about the fact that there are a lot of people out there that still want this game to be PvE centric, or for there to be a PvE mode, but the reality is, at least in my opinion, the game doesn't offer a whole lot in terms of a PvE experience. I often compare it to something like Tom Clancy's The Division 1 and 2, or any number of open world co-op games, whether they're third or first person. Those games are built around a story, dedicated NPCs or characters that you may interact with, whether it's in the world or back at your base. There's far more looting potential. The worlds are generally far larger. There's just more storytelling. There's more in terms of scripted sequences and boss battles. Whereas with Ark, you don't really get that. The first time you play it, everything is new and exciting. Facing off against even the most basic Ark enemies like the Wasps and the Hornets is somewhat thrilling. And they still are a challenge at times, especially if you get overwhelmed by them during a night raid, but eventually you figure them out. You learn how to fight them. Even things like that Bastion down there or this Rocketeer up here become easier to deal with. You learn the weak points, you get better weapons, you have a surplus of Wolfpack grenades or munitions that can take them down with one or two hits, and eventually you're no longer afraid of the enemies because you know how to deal with them and you're well equipped. Beyond resetting your character via an expedition, you're going to be able to deal with these threats, and I don't know if PvE only is really going to last you all that long. I think what keeps the game somewhat exciting or tense is the fact that you could run into a player at a moment's notice that wants your loot. And look, entertainment is subjective. Everybody's idea of fun is different, right? That's why I always hate when game developers are like, hey, we wanted to make it fun, so we did or did not do this. Well, how do you define fun? That's going to be different based on your interests. And so with this title, look, I totally get it. Again, I said this in my first impressions video. The world is incredibly immersive. You fall in love with the sights and sounds of it, and you can't help but want to explore and learn more about the story and the lore behind the game, if it actually exists. And So yeah, we can't help but look at the lost opportunity or missing potential and want more out of a PvE experience. But for those of us that do have a bit of a competitive streak or that do get enjoyment from fighting other players, I think that's what keeps me here. Because in my opinion, there's just not enough meat on the bone in terms of a PvE experience to want it to be its own thing currently. Now, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, a decade later, could this game have some sort of epic PvE story-based experience that rivals a title like The Division? It doesn't seem likely at the moment, but you never know. And if that's the case, great. But for me personally, I do like that there is PvP. I like that it keeps me on my toes and it keeps each raid tense. I don't think the game is currently interesting enough to warrant a PvE-only experience or a PvE-only mode. There's just so many better games out there, single player and multiplayer, that provide that. Just because the world is something that you may have fallen in love with aesthetically doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate well into a solid PvE experience, which is why I think Embark Studios went this direction. Now, with all of that said, I think my point is this. I've been seeing a lot of people in the community complaining about the PvP, complaining about people attacking them. With all due respect, you signed up for this. The game has PvP on the Steam tag. It has been labeled as a PvPvE game by the developers. It is something that you are allowed to do. You really can't get upset with other players for wanting to PvP in this game. This is how these titles work. It's a lot of fun for people. The fact that you may be running into a lot of friendly players in solo mode is very unique for one of these games. If you play Escape from Tarkov or any number of other extraction shooters, 99.9% of the time, you are getting shot on sight. So a lot of people that are coming into ARK are expecting a PvP experience. So if you're really serious about investing a lot of your free time into this game, you gotta adapt and overcome. Learn the maps, craft, and buy hatch keys so that you can safely extract during daytime raids. Obviously, that limits you on nighttime or event mode raids, but it is a good way to avoid hostile players around extracts or other hotly contested zones. Plus, sometimes it lets you stay in the raid a little longer, especially if you get in late. Gather enough materials, they're really not all that expensive to craft after a while. This leaper was a tad stuck after I annoyed him with some long-range bullets, but he's free now, so we're good. Anyways, speaking about PvP, you haven't seen a lot of it on this channel. I think I did one about me sniping players with an anvil pistol, and that was really only because somebody started shooting at me, so I thought, okay, all bets are off. I'm dropping everybody I see. And often that is the policy that I adopt. Do not fire unless fired upon. Sometimes I regret it, but for the most part, in this game, I'm a bit of a softie. I'll let people go if I feel that they are not a threat to me, but hey, I'm always ready to throw down, and sometimes I welcome it. Sometimes I am absolutely looking for an excuse to drop another player because, again, I do have that competitive streak. The nickname Side Strafe comes from playing first-person shooters for years and years of my life, and so I welcome it. But, you know, there are times where I know that people are here to just have a good time. They got off of a tough day of work or school or whatever, and, you know, they're just trying to enjoy the game their way, and so I do end up feeling bad about dropping people from some concealed position, so I try to think about who I'm shooting at. So, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is stop complaining about PvP so I don't feel so bad when I steal your loot. Taking some time out to comment on the raid. I think I got into this one at the 19-minute mark, and the worst I've had to deal with was around 17 minutes, and that's always a bummer because you simply don't have time to do anything. If you have a mission that happens to be on the opposite side of where you spawned, then enjoy running all the way across the map while dealing with stamina, arc threats, as well as other players. So why they haven't implemented a do not join a raid in progress option yet, I have no idea. Hopefully it's something they're looking into. I get that it could potentially lead to longer queue times, but I want a full 30-minute raid. In fact, lately, I've been thinking a lot about how I sort of wish this was an open world game, or maybe even some sort of survival title like DayZ, obviously without the jank, but, you know, something where I could take my time, enjoy the scenery, just sit and listen to the amazing sound design. Something that allows me to be immersed within this beautiful world that they've created. So for me, it's not that I wish there was a PvE only mode, it's that I wish that it was an open world game where I could just take my time and play the game in a way that suits my play style, which is typically that of a player that likes to go low, slow, moving from cover to cover, staying concealed, taking the time to sit and listen to hear enemies, whether they're players or AI. And so it is a bit disappointing, but I do understand that this is the current market trend. This is the new hot genre that everybody wants. It does provide a more immediate sense of gratification. You can get in, get out, grab some loot, do some PvP or PvE, and call it a day with a session or two. Also, in terms of technical limitations, I don't know what Unreal Engine 5 is capable of. These maps are huge, but would they need to be larger to support some sort of open world survival game? If you think about DayZ's Chernaroos, that's a really large map that was originally designed to support combined arms combat in a military simulation. So with Ark, we've got large maps, but they're also incredibly detailed, far more detailed interiors and exteriors than we would find in a game like DayZ. So therefore, if this was a large-scale open world shooter of some sort, then maybe it wouldn't look as good. Who knows? Anyways, it's just something that I've been thinking about lately, simply because sometimes the time limit's a bit annoying. Thankfully, I have brought along a hatch key for this raid because I've only got 4 minutes left. And I have been getting in the habit of crafting and buying hatch keys when I can, to the point where I really don't even have to worry about hitting a normal extract point and risking an extract camp situation because I've got my own private escape route. Now, of course, if you're in a night raid or electromagnetic storm or some other sort of event where hatches are closed, then you're out of luck. But for the daytime raids, they definitely come in handy. I think my last 2, now counting this 3 YouTube videos, have included me downing a Rocketeer, and it's not intentional. It just so happens to be one of the more interesting encounters as of late. I guess it's because they're easier to solo based on their weak points in comparison to a Bastion, a Bombardier, or other large arc unit. And I think if there is something that I concern myself with often regarding arc raiders, and as a content creator, it's how to continue to be entertaining. Not every raid is exciting. Not every raid features me downing a Rocketeer or a Bastion or has some sort of interesting player interaction or any PvP. Sometimes you get into a raid and you just loot a couple of things, maybe do a quest, and you leave. Maybe you fought a wasp or 2 along the way, and that's it. So then you try to do another raid, and it's boring as well, and so do you post it? So I guess in a way I'm curious about the type of content that people watch. If you'd like to leave a comment below, I read all the comments that I possibly can. I try to respond to them if necessary. And yeah, I guess I'm looking for a little bit of feedback regarding what is worth posting. Not just regarding this game, but all games, you know, because I'd like to cover a few other things in the future. I'd even really like to start doing single-player playthroughs again, even though I know they don't necessarily do super well on YouTube, unless you're an established Let's Play creator. I do miss playing single-player titles and editing them and making them sort of like a movie or a miniseries. But I don't know, I think regarding Ark, it's challenging just based on the nature of what it is. And if you're not creating a guide or you're not constantly showcasing clutch PvP plays, then you really got to make sure that the commentary or the discussion shines. But I think that this game or this genre is repetitive by nature. You're going in and doing the same thing over and over again, rinse and repeat. It can be challenging to even be entertaining through voice. You know, what can I talk about that I haven't talked about before based on the situations presented by a somewhat simplistic gameplay mode? And with that said, I have had some other ideas about content that I can create that takes my voice acting and sound design experience into consideration. So it would be nice to start implementing some of those ideas. However, it does often come down to the amount of free time I have to implement them. And again, entertainment is subjective, and there are potentially hundreds of videos in my decade plus as a content creator that I've scrapped that would have been perfectly fine to post, but I deleted simply because I didn't think they were good enough. And I think that is a problem that all creative or artistic people face. They're often their own worst critics and self-conscious of their productions. So, with that said, thank you all so very much for joining me. It is always appreciated. Looking forward to hearing from you in the comments, and I'll see you topside.